Today's part of our Business Spotlight program, I'm with Jack Mullane, and he's a co-owner of Chill the Beans Cafe based in Limerick. So over to you, Jack. What is it you do, and for how long you've been doing it?
So I am one of the co-owners of the Chili Beans coffee shops in Limerick City. We have four locations now. We've been established since 2020. I guess like I never try to portray myself as something that I'm not. So my there's two people in it, me and my business partner Darren. He's currently traveling at the minute, so it's just me in Ireland holding down the fort. But he started originally and I came in a bit later down the line,
Mhm.
and I suppose my journey is a bit different. I started off with Darren when he had his first shop as part-time, then I became full-time, then I became the manager, and then I got that chance to open up the shops with him and develop the business, so I guess with the four locations, we had a fifth. One didn't work out. A lot of learning, a lot of curveballs thrown in there. There's a lot of things that people don't tell you about business when you first open up, and I feel like you have to make the mistakes to learn, to add them
Mhm.
into the toolbox, as they say. So yeah, we've been established in 2020, started in a horse box, during COVID, like many others, and I suppose it developed into brick and mortar shops, and that's what we found worked for us.
Fantastic, yeah, fantastic, and yeah, we tend to learn a lot more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. They tend,
Course.
and I know I like the title of one of the books. I haven't managed to get around to reading it yet, but the title is "Fail Your Way to Success." So.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's like the more times you get knocked back, is the more times you get pushed forward, as well, So I feel like if we didn't have that bit of a fail, then we might have like opened up a few more stores in like wrong locations with like the wrong like values for us, and it could have been detrimental to the business, like.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And okay, you've started in a horse box. You've gone up to four locations now. Presumably, you're going to continue to grow. What do you attribute your growth to, apart from making mistakes?
Our growth is definitely down to like when we first started off the business, it's like friends of friends working for us, like family members, so like it was all about the customer, like our main target audience is like the younger generation. All our shops are like situated really close to like the universities in Limerick, like University of Limerick, the TUS Midwest, and Mary I. So like that's our like kind of niche, but we do cater for all types, whether you're like in a buggy or whether you're an old age pensioner, and we treat everyone the same with respect, I feel like the massive growth to our success is we keep our standards good, so like especially with coffee, we bought into it. If you get a good cup of coffee today and you get a bad one tomorrow, then you're not going to return, and
No.
for us, especially with the four locations, then is to keep that standard across the board, that if I go into our Castle Try location in the morning and go to the Munger location in the afternoon, then you're getting the same cup of coffee, and people know what they're getting, and it's not hit and miss. And another massive thing as well is we're open Monday to Sunday, 360 days a year. The only days we close is Christmas Day and Stephen's Day. And I often say, Kevin, if there's people to work them, I'll open, But like it's none of this. Are they open? Are they closed today? The hours changing? Like we have adjusted to like that periodization of like I feel like Ireland are behind London. And London are behind Australia, and like the Ireland generation, Irish generation are now waking up that bit earlier and going to the gym and walking. So we're now open at 7. We were open at 8 before, so getting accustomed to that, and keeping up with what's going on in the world, like we've introduced like different things to our menu. We've introduced like better services for our consumer. Do you know what I mean? And again, people don't like too much change, but like if you increase it gently and slowly and with them, then they're okay about it. Like.
Fantastic, fantastic. And again, if you had to start from square one in business, what would you do differently?
Yeah, again, so like I suppose we at the start would have like taken that concept of like, we'll go to like places where it's a bit quieter, there's not much other competition going on, and we'll target them, we'll swoop up whatever we can get. But I actually had a conversation with one of my good friend's father, and he owns a steel company, and he said, "You'll only make money wherever the big boys are." Do you know, that kind of way, like, so we took that bit of advice, so we started small, but now we're going into the bigger places, and I suppose just to take that risk, like, and where there's more footfall, there'll be more traffic, there'll be more customers. So I suppose that, and I also think I think from the start would be like, and what we didn't exactly know is like, there's a lot of legislation and stuff like, like even though like our staff get treated very fairly, they get paid appropriately, but like even with keeping up with the HR stuff, keeping up, like we've no like commercial sides is kind of all myself, so like there are things in the business, like, until you actually sit down and work out what you're paying, like, for a cup of coffee ourselves before we even it gets to the customer. You need to know all them things, at the start is what we would have said is like on the back of a fag box, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't set in stone, and we were going and working off mad figures and stuff, so you need to really know your margins.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, figures are the language of business, and you need to be
Yes.
fluent in it, and you
Yeah.
need to know your numbers for your particular business. That's certainly one of the things I'm pretty big on myself, with
Yeah. Yeah.
my own background. I think you've covered some of it here, but what have been your biggest learnings as an employer since you began in business?
Yeah, so like I feel like even since like I started in business, like I know what it's like to like work in like other retail jobs, I worked with my dad laboring for a long time, I worked in hospitality, like I know what it's like to get like roared and shout at. I know what it's like to be working long hours, going into a place with like no windows, you know what I mean, going in when it's dark, coming out when it's dark, and I suppose like what we've tried to do with our staff is like not make it feel like work, they're like coming into our shops, like, do you know what I mean? Everyone's friends with friends. They go off playing, don't go into Pilates, they go to gym together, and I suppose that's the kind of vibe we've created, you know what I mean? And I suppose that has been a big learning curve for us, and trying to adapt that, and whether it be like buy the staff lunch or do staff parties and kind of bring communication, community, and get everyone together, that's a big learning thing.
Massive, yeah, massive. I mean, and like it's always been important, but before COVID, we probably didn't pay as much attention to that. Post-COVID,
Yeah,
now it's front and center, and it's
yeah,
building this community. Some people call it a tribe, some people call it a family environment. You call it what you like, but the more that people are engaged with each other, the more productive they are, and the more
yeah.
more everybody. One of my
You
quotes.
actually you actually personally get more output out of them, and then for us, then the end consumer, which is the customer, is happier because we always like, you can go into other establishments and you can get a half decent cup of coffee. Don't get me wrong, but you're just getting a cup of coffee and in chill the beans. It's, oh hi, how are you? Do you know what I mean? How's your day going? Next thing you know, the staff are and the customers are interacting like, oh my God, I saw this, I saw that. Do you know what I mean? So it's all like, all about the customer, and like everyone feels welcome. And sorry, just to touch on that point as well, is what you find is, and what we've definitely always tried to do is, I feel like in the world we live in today in society, everyone's just ready for a fight, like, so like if like if an order is wrong or something and they come up like and they think there's gonna be an argument, no problem, we'll remake it. If something drops on the ground, you know what I mean, we'll give you a new one, and then people are like, oh, I wasn't expecting this, do you know what I mean? Like, if someone's short a few euro, no problem, we'll catch you again tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, you're not like so hung up on like what's right and what's wrong, do you know, that kind of way.
Yeah, no, it's all about the people, and more
Yes.
and more so. It always has been, but it's even more and more so going forward. Couldn't
Yeah.
agree with you more. And the other one then is, how do you balance your personal life with the demands of running a business or four businesses in your case?
Yeah, I suppose that's actually a funny one. Like if you ask me and you ask my girlfriend, they would have two different answers.
Yeah, I've
You
yeah, come
know,
across that before. Yeah.
yeah. And I definitely, I do a lot of self-growth and stuff, and I do a lot of like workshops and stuff and bit to do mental health and stuff, and I was at this talk one time with a mental coach, and I asked him, like how do you get balance, like, and like it's like that analogy of the spinning plates, you're spinning plate, you go run over, spin another plate here, spin another plate there. He said sometimes you just need to let a few plates fall, and he said he doesn't like to look at it as balance as more as like harmonization, so like For me, yeah, I might work long hours, or I might have to go here and go there on the weekends, whatever to do if something gets called. But as long as everyone's working together, like you know what I mean, like so whether I go and do my fitness in the morning, if I have to work late that evening, if it's spend time with my family or my friends, like after work, then I just have to get more done the next day and stuff. As long as it's all kind of working alongside each other, well, then that's okay. You know what I mean? Like so, I don't think there's ever a balance. There's always going to be you're going to always do more work, you know what I mean? Then you're kind of going to spend more time with family and then your fitness or whatever it might be. So as long as everyone's getting touched and then everyone's okay.
Fantastic, fantastic. And have you any kids at this stage?
No, not yet. I was going to say
Well,
thank God, but
they're going to throw a wrench in the works as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
think for
So
me.
we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Exactly. Very wise. Very wise. Um, so again, we touched on it a bit, but what qualities do you look for in employees, and how do you foster, a positive and productive work environment? You talked about it, but how do we foster it? How do we make it happen?
I suppose, like again, like I'm right here now talking to you, Kevin. Like there's four shops like running like clockwork right now. You know what I mean? With staffs in it. And I suppose for me, I have to look at like bubbliness, chattiness. Because that's what I look for. If someone comes to me in an interview, or like I don't even call it an interview, it's more of a chat, more face to face, putting it face to the name. And they can't even speak to me with fluidity. Well, then I know that they're not a right fit for the job. If someone's able to come in here, tell me with a chat and able to chat the back legs off me, well then you're perfect for what we look for, you
Mhm.
know. Like with us, like I like to train someone even in from start to finish. It takes me about 3 or 4 weeks to make someone from never making a coffee before to a full-time barista, you know.
Okay.
Um so it's like that analogy of like when you're on your L place driving and you're driving around your car and you create bad habits, like I'd rather someone nearly rather come in with no experience, that kind of way.
So they
So like
don't carry any bad habits with them. Like, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So like to foster them good relationships and stuff, it's chattiness, it's bubbliness, and just a good vibe and a good aura, like you know what I mean. And again, like I think that does get even enhanced then when you come into shops because all the other staff will be like that then, and it pulls other people out of it, like. And it's funny enough, I was only working with a few of the staff there on the weekend when I call in, and we were chatting about like people have came through like work experience, like the TY work experience, and we actually have five staff with us right now that have came through the TY work experience program, and like even that, like that is really I feel influential, like.
Great, great, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the phrase we use is hire for attitude and train for skills.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. 100%.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny. I just I was coaching with a client earlier up the country, and they had an interview with a lady, and she had experience, all right, but the attitude blew them away. But they knew what they were looking for because they've
Mm.
worked a lot on their culture, on their core values, on their vision and mission, where they're going, that kind of stuff. And like they were talking with the owner and a group of his management team, and they were talking about it, and they said, "Yeah, just hire her straight away, get her in."
Mm.
So, because again, he said the attitude was so good, they know they could train her for whatever they needed.
Yes. Exactly. And she'll be willing to adapt to whatever comes our way. Then. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And maybe just to round up, Jack, what are some common misconceptions about running a business and how do you address them?
That's a tough one, I suppose. Because it's funny, like I go to a gym close enough to this branch that I'm in at the minute, Castle Troy, and I'm good friends with all the lads there and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, you're making loads of money, this, that, and the other, like like because the shops are full, and like people think that they're paying 3.90 for a cup of coffee, that there's a 60 or 75% markup on it, like you know what I mean. But like the misconception then for me would be like. People don't realize the cost, like, you know what I mean? People don't realize the cost of the cup, the lid, if they get sugar, if they get syrup and alternative milk, the labor behind it, you know what I mean? Your overheads, and I think people don't see that, like I get a bill the other day for like €1,000 for a water bill for here. Like nobody sees them types of stuff, like, you know what I mean?
Hmm, hmm.
So like I'd actually love people to see the books at times, like, you know what I mean? That it's not always rosy in the garden, like, you know what I mean? Times can be tough, like, you know what I mean? But you have to just make it work, like.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I know we often interview business owners and say, why'd you go into business? And they say, yeah, I want to make more money and have more time. Of course, the follow-up question, how's that working out for you, you know?
Yeah, yeah, not so great at the start, you know. Now, we are very lucky from a process that, like, you know, like we do have a lower cost. Like, I think we're like, we are one of the cheapest in the city for a cup of coffee, you know, but we have such high output that we get away with that, like, you know what I mean?
Oh,
But
pretty high
it kind of,
volume. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, kind of pushes and pulls, like, you know, if you weren't doing such a high output, then we'd have to up the prices, you know, that kind of way, you
Mhm.
know. And again, people don't realize, like, you know, the minimum wage is gone up, like, it'll be gone up like €3 or €4 since like 2022, going up again in January, you know, like we haven't upped the prices since last year and stuff, you know, so like we take the hit in that, like, you know, like the new scheme of like the pensions and stuff coming in, like, you
Auto
know.
enrollment, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you know, so like people don't understand that, like, you know, if it doesn't, like they could read an article online about auto enrollment and be like, oh yeah, sure, like, do you know what I mean? But no, like I look at that and I'm like, oh, now that'll cost me more money, you know what I mean? Like, which is a great incentive, and I'm definitely backing it. But like, you know, it's just like these are the hidden costs, like, you know, and people just don't understand, like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a very common misconception. All right, Jack.
yeah.
No. Listen, Jack, it's been great talking to you. And there's a lot of stuff in there for our viewers. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences. And again, thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Kevin. Thank you.